Good morning.
Memhei Amid Beis, and in the Mishnah we saw machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan Nuri and the Chachamim. If a person who is asleep, whether he has a kind of shvisa, whether it's considered that wherever he is outside of his city, still defines his space. He's kind of shvisa there. That's a Shabbos space, and as a result, he has 2,000 amma on each side. Or since he's not conscious, he's asleep, he doesn't really kind of shvisa, he doesn't create his Shabbos space right there. And therefore he would not have more than 4 amos when he wakes up. Wherever he is, he can only be 4 amos. That's the question. That's the machlokas in the Mishnah. Rava asked, what's the basis of Rabbi Yochanan Nuri? Is the basis of Rabbi Yochanan Nuri because ownerless items, a hefker item, also has no has an ability to be kind of shvisa? Wherever the item is has 2,000 amma, and so being asleep is like that? Or is it specifically to people, but ownerless items would not have such kinyan shvisa? So that's what Rava asked. And Rabbi Yosef responded from a brisa, which said that rain that came before Yontif and filled a pit, so then it's 2,000 amma on each side. Well, if it came on Yontif, then it depends on whoever draws the water. So he said, whose opinion is this, that if it came before Yontif, it gets 2,000 amma? Must be Rabbi Yochanan Nuri, because Rabbi Yochanan Nuri is the one who says that when you're asleep you get 2,000 amma, and must be that he also says the rain acquired its place before Yontif, and that's why he gets 2,000 amma.
I'm assuming that he fell asleep before Shabbos.
Sorry?
I'm assuming he fell asleep before Shabbos started, or he fell asleep on Shabbos.
No, always at the onset of Shabbos is what defines your space. So if he was awake at the beginning of Shabbos, that's not gonna minimize his. I mean, we all sleep on Shabbos, so that's not gonna take away his shvisa. It's that at the onset of Shabbos, at the moment that defines a person's place for Shabbos, he was asleep.
This is relevant for me. Could happen.
Sorry?
This is relevant for me. It could happen.
No, this is outside of a city. If you're in your place, there's no question that that's your shvisa. That's your place. It's when you have a home and you're outside of that. You're outside of a city. You're traveling, and you're asleep at the onset of Shabbos. Does that count as a kona shvisa? Essentially, it has to uproot your home to define your space where you are. That's where it's a question. But if you're in your city, so it doesn't make a difference if you're asleep. You'll have shvisa. You're in your house. In any case, so Rav Safra responded and said, well, no proof that Rabbi Yochanan Nuri says that the rain, and the reason the rain has 2,000 amma is on account of Rabbi Yochanan Nuri's idea that even ownerless items can be defined as getting a Shabbos space at the onset of Shabbos, and here the rain was there before Yontif, so it was kind of shvisa. It got its Yontif space at the onset of Yontif. Maybe the reason is because this pit is right near a city, and so it gets 2,000 amma from the city, like the intent of the people in the city. To which Rabbi Yosef responded from another brisa to support himself. And now the Gemara is going to tell us that he came and Rabbi Yosef told this story in front of the Chachamim. Ki asa l'kamen Rabbi Yosef. When Rabbi Safra, responding and defending Rabbi Yosef's opinion, came before Rabbi Yosef, he said, this is what Rabbi Safra responded. And this is what I responded to him. This is what Abaye said about his conversation with Rav Safra, that he proved it from another brisa. Why did you need a new brisa to support it? From the first brisa itself that I brought, there's proof. Because what does the brisa say? Rain that came Erev Yantif gets 2,000 amma. Well, if the reason is because this rain fell into a pit and the pit is a part of the city, and because it's just outside of a city, so it's a part of the city, so it doesn't have 2,000 amma on each side. If it's 500 amma outside of the city, it only has 1,500 amma on one side and has 2,500 on the other, because it gets the rule of the people of the city. That's what you're arguing, that the water itself is inanimate and therefore doesn't get its own space. But since they are a part of the intent of the people of the city, it gets the rules of the people of the city. Well, then it doesn't get 2,000 amma on each side. It gets 2,000 amma of the city, which means for the pit, it gets less on one side. If it's near a city, this that it says that the water pit has 2,000 amma on each side, it should be the same distance that the people of the city can go. And it doesn't say that, which indicates to us that the water itself, even though it's inanimate, it does get the halachas of Kona Shvisa. It acquires a space for Shabbos, and it gets 2,000 amma on each side. And a person who's asleep, similarly, will get 2,000 amma, even though he, at the time of the onset of Shabbos, he's not. It needs no intent. And the Chachamim say, no, you need intent, and therefore this person only gets 4 ammas. But however, the Gemara said earlier that a few daf ago that you don't have to actually express it verbally, and that just being there is going to be sufficient if you're awake, according to the Chachamim. And Rabbi Yochanan says, no, you don't have to be awake. Wherever you are, you're Kona Shvisa, you acquire the Shabbos space for yourself, and you have 2,000 amma on each side. So for the water, the rainwater that fell before Yantif, we say that before Yantif, it gives you 2,000. It gets 2,000 amma. However, if the rain falls on Yantif, then it goes based upon whoever draws the water. Why do we say that it has the because it's ownerless, and at the onset of Shabbos it had none of its own space, and therefore whoever draws it defines its space. Why? After all, this did have a space at the onset of Shabbos. It was in the ocean, and that should define its space. So let's say this proves not like Rabbi Eliezer. Because he says that the rain all comes from the ocean. So Rabbi Yitzchak says maybe we're talking about clouds that were there already at the onset of Shabbos. It was cloudy at the onset of Shabbos, the onset of Yantif, and then it actually rained on Yantif, and therefore these were not in the ocean anymore. They were up in the clouds above us. The Gemara says, who says it's the same clouds? Maybe these are gone, and the next ones have come. So the Gemara says, no, he knows, he saw the clouds, he knows that these are the same clouds, and they're raining now, and so the water was already at the onset of Shabbos above our area. Or perhaps have a suffix d'Rabbanan, the Devrayim. This is a rabbinic doubt, a doubt about a rabbinic prohibition. Suffix d'Devrayim lahakil, and since it's rabbinic, there's any time there's a doubt, you can be lenient. Now, why is this d'Rabbanan? So we saw that the concept of 2,000 amma is for sure a rabbinic limit, but if the concept of techumin, whether the concept of not traveling outside a city at all is the oraisa or not, we saw 2 opinions. We discussed this briefly before, that there are opinions that say that the limit is 12,000 amma on a Torah level, or that there's no limit on a Torah level. So this could be rabbinic that way, but according to the opinion that says that the limit is that midoraisa, from a Torah prohibition, there is 12,000 amma limit. Well, the rain coming from the ocean could be more than 12,000 amma. However, the Mepharshim say that it's true that that there may be a Torah prohibition of techumin, but not on inanimate objects. And rain would not be included in that. So the concept of rain being included in having a Shabbos limit is rabbinic. And on that derabanan, suffix the devrayim lahakil, suffix of a derabanan, you can be lenient. Now the Gemara says, okay, fine. So you say that it was over our area, but it is more than 2,000 amma. It's more than 3,000 feet up in the sky. And so perhaps we should say that it traveled 3,000 amma to get down here. Tifshat mina, so let's prove from this, the question that we had a few days ago of whether or not above 10 tefachim of the ground, which is the public domain, or which is the techum domain, above there's no limit of techum. And we had a question if somebody can fly or on a boat, whether or not there's no limit of techum. So too, let's prove from here, from the fact that there is no limit of techum in regards to clouds that were right above us, even though it was above 2,000 amma. So let's say that proves that there's no limit of techumin above 10 tefachim. Because if not, let's say the rain was already defined in the clouds, that's a Shabbos space. So no, maybe the way it works is that the clouds are a balloon and the water is just inside it, and so we can't see the water, so it doesn't exist until we can see it. So now we go to Mem Vav Amid Beis. So then the Gemara says, okay, so then we have another problem. So then the water came into existence on Shabbos, and it's nolad, it's a newly created thing, which is muksa, dasiri. Elamai Bava at night. No, of course we know the water is in the clouds and it's moving along with the clouds. So the reason it's not going to have a defined space for Shabbos is because it's actually moving. It's not it's not in a stationary place. So it doesn't acquire a space for itself. Now that you explain that this is a concept, something that's constantly moving does not acquire shvisa. So then we can answer the first question. What was the first question? The water is coming from the ocean, rising up, and then coming down from the clouds. Well, then it should have its Shabbos space in the ocean. No, it's always moving in the ocean. It never has a stationary place, and then it goes up into the clouds, and then the clouds are pushed across. So at no point has it been stationary. So therefore, it does not acquire a Shabbos space. It's only when it comes down as water in the pit that it has a Shabbos space. So Gemara says, now that we explain this, the ocean water is also always moving and does not acquire a Shabbos space. Tani, we learned and so too we learn that rivers and streams and well springs that are flowing, whoever draws the water defines the Shabbos space because it doesn't have a space beforehand because it's constantly moving. Amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, Amar Yeshua ben Levi, halacha Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuni. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi said in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuni, meaning that even a person that's asleep can get his Shabbos space defined where he is, and also that inanimate objects acquire their space and they have 2,000. You heard Rabbi Shua ben Levi say this explicitly, or you're inferring it? No, he explicitly said that the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuni in our Mishnah. My Kollel, where would you have inferred it from? What was the Gemara's question? Rabbi Shua ben Levi, because Rabbi Shua ben Levi said as a general rule Halacha kedvrei hamekel be'eruv. In regards to eruv, meaning defining the space for Shabbos, for that at this point the Gemara is going to think both for chatzeros, for defining courtyard spaces and alleyway spaces that you can carry in, and defining your travel limit spaces for Shabbos. We always follow the lenient opinion. The Mefarshim would say that that excludes the boundary making, the making of the walls and boundaries. Those are Torah concepts, and we don't follow the lenient opinion per se. In any case, he said that we always follow the lenient opinion, and so therefore, in our Mishnah, where the Chachamim say that someone's asleep only has 4 amma, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says no, he has 2,000 amma. So maybe you're inferring from there that Allah is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. So Gemara says, well, why did he have to say both statements? Now that we know that he said to Rabbi Yaakov Baridi that the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri in our Mishnah, and he also said the halacha is like whoever is lenient, shouldn't one of these been sufficient? But Rabbi Zeir says, I need both of these teachings. If he had said the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Hava Amina bein lakula bein lachumra, then it may have thought that it's both to be lenient and to be strict. If it works out to be a leniency, which is that a person is asleep, and the Chachamim say he only has 4 amas, so therefore the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, that you have more than that. But also to be strict and to say that ownerless vessels are limited by 2,000 amma, and you cannot say that they have more than 2,000 amma by whoever draws it. Therefore, he says, no, the opinion is like whoever is lenient by Eruv, that you can actually split this and say the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri in regards to a human that even though he's asleep, acquires 2,000 amma on each side. However, inanimate objects, which it would be beneficial if it doesn't acquire its own space, and therefore whoever picks it up gets to define its space, and they can take it with themselves even to 4,000 amma away. If they happen to be at the limit of their 2,000 amma, they can take it back to their center, and then 2,000 amma the other way. That would be a leniency, so that too is the halacha. So then just say the halacha is like the lenient opinion by Eruv. Halacha Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. So why do we have to say that halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri? Itzrich. Still, we need that. Why? I may have thought, when is this true? Yachid bin Malkam Yachid. If Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is disagreeing with an individual, like you say, the halacha is like the opinion that is lenient. I may have thought if it's an individual arguing with an individual, so it's 1 against 1, or it's a rabbim arguing with a rabbim, so it's many against many. So even though one may be the majority, but it is a plurality against a plurality. So therefore, then we're going to say the halacha is like the lenient one. But if it was an individual arguing against a rabbim, so then perhaps that we would not say the halacha is like to be lenient, even like the single opinion against the majority. The halacha, perhaps there we would agree that even in Eruv, we have to go with the majority. So therefore, he said, no, even in Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri alone, against the Chachamim, the halacha is Divrei HaMekel, like the lenient.
I wanted to ask something. It's not really a question, but I was just thinking during this whole discussion that we see all the time. There's Hayachid Harabim. I mean, that's him, and the Rabbanan said this. It's like, we're very insensitized, but I mean, it's got to be a big deal for a person. I mean, unless he learned it from his Rebbe and he's stuck like a Kavim and Halil. He's stuck with it. He learned it from his Rebbe that way. That's the way it is. But for a person on Svara to go against the Chachamim, it's got to be a big deal. Not like, yeah, well, I don't agree with you. We just assume that people are always allowed to argue. I don't think it's such an assumption. I mean, you have to be someone to Can you imagine the first time he took on the Chachamim? You know, I mean, it's like a big deal.
Yeah, but he was one of the Chachamim. Rabbi Akiva disagreed, and so he said so. These were the great Chachamim, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is one of the first generation of Amoraim, one of the great, and sorry, the last generations of Tanoim, and one of the greats, and he disagreed. Rabbi Yeshua is his contemporary, and Rabbi Akiva is his contemporary, and Rabbi Gamliel is his contemporary. These are the great Chachamim. But Allah is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, even though that he's an individual against the majority. And if you think about it, I think your point being, you think about who the majority is these are giants. These are great Tanoim, and yet the Allah is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Amalei Rava la'Abaye. So Rava said to Abaye, Mechti, let's analyze this whole conversation here. Eruvin d'Rabbanan. This concept of Eruvin is rabbinic, whether it's the limit of 2,000 amma, which is rabbinic, or the concept of Techum in general is rabbinic. Whichever way it is, the halachas that we're dealing with and the machlokes that they're arguing about is a rabbinic prohibition. It's a d'Rabbanan. If so, mali yachid b'makom yachid, mali yachid b'makom rabim. What distinction should there be between whether it's an individual arguing against the majority or an individual again arguing against an individual? Either way, we now have a doubt what the halacha is, and therefore, as the halacha is a doubt in rabbinic matters, you can be lenient. So that's why we're lenient. We follow the lenient opinion, not because we're ruling like the lenient opinion, but because we're left with a doubt. And the doubt, the halacha with the doubt is that by d'Rabbanan you could go with the mekel, with the lenient. To which a challenge. Amalei Rapapa l'Rava. So Rapapa challenged Rava. He said, what, that's not true. It's true. When there's an individual one against one, it makes sense that creates a doubt, and therefore you can be lenient. But do you really think it's not? There's no distinction if there's an individual arguing against the majority in a rabbinic matter that leaves the same equal doubt, and therefore we can just go with the lenient opinion. Now, in that case, as he's going to try and prove from other cases, in a rabbinic matter, we're going to follow the majority on account of that doesn't leave an equal doubt. You have the majority of Chachamim saying one way and a single Chacham saying the other way. We're going to go with the majority. Vatanan. We learned in the Mishnah. The beginning of Maseches Nida deals with a woman who did not know she was menstruating and found some blood. At how far back does she have to assume she started her period and therefore became tamei, and whatever she touched was tamei? So how far back? Well, we saw a Mishnah till the last time she checked. One opinion. The other opinion is 24 hours. And then there's a concept of daya shata that sometimes, or in some opinions, that it would be sufficient to just go from here on. Whenever you find the blood, that's when you assume it came. But to now we learned. Rabbi Eliezer says, "Kol isha she'avra leha shalosh shonos," a woman who missed 3 cycles. Daya shata. So therefore, she now gets the established norm of not getting her period, whether it's due to pregnancy or nursing, whatever it is. But on account of that, she's considered a mesulek as damim, someone whose body is not producing the menstrual blood, and dayashata, and therefore, when she finds it, it would be sufficient at that moment, and you don't have to retroactively assume that anything was touched beforehand is tummy. But Tanya and the Brisa teaches about that. Masavasa Rebbe Rabbi Eliezer. That once Rebbe ruled like Rabbi Eliezer. La'acha sheniskar. And then he remembered, no, that's a minority opinion. That's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion against the majority. Amar Kedai Rabbi Eliezer Lismach Alav Shas Adchak. Well, at this point, it's already a Shas Adchak. It's already a difficulty, and it was, Rashi says, it was a difficult time. People didn't have a lot of food, and this person would have already touched a lot of food that would have become tamei on account of it. So we can rely on Rabbi Eliezer, b'diavad ex post facto, and be lenient. Now, my lachash and iska, what does it mean after he remembered? What did he remember that he said, oh, it's not the halacha, but nevertheless, we can rely on it in such a case? Did he remember that the halacha is not like Rabbi Eliezer, that the ruling is like the Rabbanan? So who cares, Shas Adchak or not? That's not the ruling. The law is not that way. So what? Why did he follow this opinion, even in a Shas Adchak, even in such a difficult time? So rather, it had not been ruled as a final ruling one way or another. It's still a matter of dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim. Rather, what it was is that at first he had thought it was Rabbi Eliezer's opinion against a single individual. So then we can be lenient. However, Elo Rabim Pliale. But once you remembered that it was Rabbi Eliezer against the majority, so we can't just be lenient in this matter. And this is a matter of D'Rabbanan to say that retroactively we're going to say something is tamei when we don't know that it became tamei. That's a rabbinic enactment to say that, we saw at the beginning of Nida, in order to make sure that a person's aware of what and checks themselves. So we say retroactively something's tamei for 24 hours or whatever it is. And Rabbi Eliezer is saying, since she had no reason to assume it was coming because she missed 3 cycles, we can be lenient. That's a rabbinic, being lenient about a rabbinic matter. So Rabbi at first thought you can rely on the single opinion of Rabbi Eliezer because he was arguing against a single opinion, and then he remembered no, he's actually arguing against the majority, and you cannot rely on the single opinion. The only reason we can is because of this concept of Shas Adchak. Rabbi Eliezer is so great that we can rely on him in a place of need. Therefore, he said, so what we see is that when you have a single opinion in a rabbinic matter against the majority, you cannot rely on it because it's not an equal doubt. You have the majority saying one way and a single opinion saying saying the other. That doesn't create a doubt about a rabbinic matter that you could just go with the lenient opinion. So Rava, we see over there from that Mishnah and the story with Rebbe that it's not an equal doubt when you have all the Chachamim on one side and one Chacham on the other. Amar Rav Mishasha l'Rava v'Amri la Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak l'Rava. Rav Mishasha Rav Nachman Yitzchak said to Rava also, do you really think that a single opinion against a majority is going to be the same as a single opinion against a single opinion? And either way, it creates a doubt, an equal doubt, and therefore you can be lenient in a rabbinic manner, like we just saw. Another proof to this concept that when it's a single opinion against a majority, we do have to be strict. Vatani, we learned Shemua Karova Nehega Shiva Shloshim. We know that there's a concept of Shiva and there's a concept of Shloshim after the loss of an immediate family member. What we know is that there is a Torah obligation of mourning for some period at the beginning of the mourning process. There's a machlokes of exactly how long, but the complete 7 days and the 30 days, those are d'Rabbanan for sure. Now, the halacha is that if somebody hears close, meaning immediately after someone's passing, of their immediate relative, so then they have to keep Shiva and Shloshim. However, Shmua Rechoka, if it's been a while and they hear much later, so then so then you only have to keep 1 day of more Shiva. That's obviously Shiva means 7, so you're not keeping 1 day of 7, but 1 day of the concept that we call Shiva. Now, ve'ezui karova, what constitutes a having heard immediately versus ve'ezu rechaka, what constitutes having heard later, and therefore it does not count as you don't have to do Shiva. B'toch shloshim, if you're here within the first month, or for the 30 days from the passing, within the shloshim, sakrova, so then even if this person only heard on day 29, they would have to start Shiva at this point. La'achar shloshim, however, once it's past the 30 days, rechoka, that's going to count as having heard late, and therefore they only have to keep 1 day of Shiva. Divrei Rabbi Akiva, that's Rabbi Akiva's opinion, a single opinion. But the majority disagree, and they say achashmua, karova v'achashmua, rechoka, nehega shiva shloshim. Regardless of when somebody hears, whether it's immediately after the passing or later, they have to keep Shiva and 30 and shloshim. And Rabbi Bar Bar Chana said, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Kol Makom Shatam Moitzi Yochanan Mekel v'Rabbi Machmirin Halacha Gediver Machmirin Amarubin. So Rabbi Yochanan said a rule like this: if you have a single majority against a single minority against a majority, and the majority are strict, you're always going to follow that strict majority. Chutz mizu. Besides, for this particular case, even though Rabbi Kiva is being lenient and the Chachamim being strict, and they're the majority, the halacha is like Rabbi Kiva, and we follow that Shmua Rechoka. When somebody heard after the Shloshim, they only keep 1 day of Shiva. Halacha Gedivrei Rabbi Kiva, the halacha is like Rabbi Kiva. So we see so they say to Rava, we see that in general, even if it's a rabbinic matter, you have a single opinion against the rabbim, against the majority opinion, we're going to go with the majority. The Gemara says, "V'savar la," and Rabbi Yochanan, who says that the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva over here, "Savar like a Shmuel," he follows the opinion of Shmuel. The Amar Shmuel halacha gedivrei Mekel ba'avil. That by avil, in regard, just like we saw by Eruv, the halacha is like whoever is lenient. So too by avil, the halacha is like whoever is lenient. Now this also has its limits to in what manners, but nevertheless, the halacha is like the that's a general rule. In matters of mourning, the chachamim were lenient. What we see is that in all other rabbinic manners, not referring to avelos, then we're going to be strict. In a man, then we're going to go with the majority, not strict necessarily. We're going to go with the majority over the single opinion, and only when there are two single opinions, it's person A against person B, Tana A against Tana B, Chacham A against Chacham B. That's what we're going to say. The halacha is like the lenient one. Now we go to Memvav and Beis. V'rapapa itzrich le, and this teaching of Reshuba Levi that said the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, even though he says in general the halacha is like the lenient opinion. Why do we need this? Itzrich, because Saka Daita Chameni I may have thought Hani Mili be'aruva chetzeres ava beruva techumen eim aloi. Maybe this that we said as a general rule, the halacha is like whoever is lenient in regards to Eruv. Maybe it only means in regards to the courtyard Eruv, but not in regards to the distance Eruv. Therefore, we needed him to say also halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. And why would you think there is such a distinction? Courtyard Eruvs, you can be lenient. Distance Eruvs, you have to be strict. The Tanan, as we learned, this is in regards to acquiring an Eruv on account of someone else. Can I add a bread and add to the Eruv meal for someone else? So Rabbi Yehuda says, that you cannot do so at a techum, at the distance eruv. But but in a courtyard eruv, Shabbos is coming, and people are knocking at your door to get your bread so that we can join the meal, and everybody in the courtyards has joined bread in the meal, and you are not answering the door. So I can go and say, here, I'm putting in another bread, and this one's for the neighbor in that building. Why? Because something that's a matter of benefit, you can be a beneficiary on behalf of someone else, even without their permission, because it's all benefit. But you can't do something that's detrimental, even if there is a benefit. And so when I acquire the eruv of distance, even though that it gives you an extra 2,000 amma on the west side, but it limits you on the east side, and therefore there is a detriment there, and so I cannot do it on your behalf without your permission. Ravashi Amar Itzrich. Ravashi says there's another reason that we needed to teach that Allah is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, because maybe the Allah of being lenient is only in the matter of the leftovers of Eruv. This is an interesting halacha. I put out a bread at the for my Eruv at 2,000 amma outside of the city, and I get there and there's almost none of it left. It's mostly been eaten, but I put out the requisite amount. It had a good amount when I put it there, but by the time I need it, there's nothing left, or almost nothing left. So there, the halacha is you can be lenient in regards to the to what's left, but you can't be lenient in regards to how much you need to start. But in the actual starting of the eruv and making it happen, perhaps you can't be lenient. How do you know there's a distinction between what's left and what's beginning? The time we learned, Rabbi Yisrael said, this, that you can be lenient, that you don't need a full 2 meals, is with the beginning of an eruv. Sorry, you can't be lenient by the beginning of an eruv. But what remains of the eruv that you first put there that was valid, any amount's going to be good. And here the Mishnah throws in, and the whole concept of Eruv in the courtyard in any case is so that the children remember the concept of Eruv. That's why you have to go through such a function of putting in meals. Rashi over here and Tosfos deal with, what are we talking about? There is no concept of the need for Eruv other than remember that the children should remember it. And that the main concept of putting out a meal is only by the distant of an Eruv, or is that, or as Tosfos said, brings from Rashi later, and it says it here, that the reason is because you already have a joint meal in the alleyway. So the courtyard doesn't need its own meal, and the meal in the courtyard is there so that the children, so the next generation remembers the concept of that you need to have an Eruv, you need to have a joint space. In any case, whatever that Mishnah means, and we'll see it later, we see over there that there's a distinction between the beginning of making your Eruv and what remains. Now the Gemara is going to go through some rules of who we say the halach is like. Rav Yaakov and Rav Zrika Amru. Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Zrika, they said, halacha ka Rabbi Akiva mechaveiro. Whenever Rabbi Akiva and one other chacham, one other Tana disagree, the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. But if there is a majority against Rabbi Akiva, then the halacha is not necessarily like Rabbi Akiva. Uka Rabbi Yossi mechaveirov, but the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, regardless of whether he's arguing against one or majority. Uka Rebbe mechaveirov. The halacha is also like Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, the compiler of the Mishnah, when he's disagreeing with one individual. So Lamai Hilchasa. In regards to what halacha? So Ravasi Amar halacha, Ravasi says that it is always the halacha that way, meaning that it is a ruling. That is the absolute ruling, like Rabbi Akiva over an individual. like Rabbi Yossi against even the majority, like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi over an individual. The halacha is always, that is the ruling. It becomes a proper ruling. However, Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Matin. But Rabbi Chia bar Abba says no, it's not actually that it's a total ruling. But Rabbi Yaakov Razrika is saying that we lean towards that direction, and when we have to adjudicate, when we have to rule, so we're going to look at Rabbi Yossi even though that it's against the majority, and we're going to look at Rabbi Akiva even though that it's equal machlokes 1-1, and we're going to lean with them, and therefore you can teach that way in majority case and make that the public statement but it doesn't mean that somebody can't rule the other way. It's not a final ruling. However, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina says nirin. All it means is that we understand that that it has the more weighted side, but it's not a ruling, and you don't even teach one way over the other in the academies. There you teach both. It's just that one of them is the one that you're more likely to emphasize. And this concept comes up several times, whether we say halacha, it's a final halacha one way, or matin, that we teach it that way, but there is still another valid opinion the other way, or actually nirin. Both are valid opinions, and we teach them both. We don't teach one over the other. But the statement is that we accept that this seems the correct way. Here's a statement from Rabbi Yaakov Ridi that he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yehuda, halacha Rabbi Yehuda. When it's Rabbi Meir against Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yossi, when it's an argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, halacha Rabbi Yossi. In fact, as we just saw before, the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi even against the majority. Rein tzarach lemar Rabbi Meir, and then I don't have to tell you that if Rabbi Yossi wins over Rabbi Yehuda wins over Rabbi Meir, for sure Rabbi Yossi wins over Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi, halacha Rabbi Yossi. Now, hashta b'makam Rabbi Yehuda leisa, b'makam Rabbi Yossi b'bay. If the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi over Rabbi Yehuda, for sure he's over Rabbi Meir. Amar Rabbi Asi, afani lomed, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, halacha Rabbi Yossi. Based on this, I can also say that Rabbi Yossi arguing with Rabbi Shimon, the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. Because we have another statement in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, halacha Rabbi Yehuda. That if Rabbi Shimon or Rabbi Yehuda are arguing, the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yossi is going to have the halacha over Rabbi Yehuda. So then it's also for sure going to be over Rabbi Shimon. If the statement of Rabbi Shimon is not counted as halacha in the presence of Rabbi Yehuda, for sure it's not in the presence of Rabbi Yossi. Well, what about Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon, which are Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi both are going to be halacha over them? But what about the two of them? We don't know. Rabbi Shasha says these rules do not exist, and tomorrow Bez Hashem will see why he disagrees with these rules. Where does he see that we rule like one of these individuals over the other that we mentioned before?